And tonight I'm also here in my capacity as the Deputy General Counsel and General Manager for Legal Ops at JILA. This is a joint collaboration event between Women in Law Japan, Japan In-House Counsel Network, and Japan In-House Lawyers Association, brought to you with the support of JILA Legal. So far as we're aware, this is really the first event of its kind in Japan, and there is clearly a lot of interest, and we've actually had 127 RSVPs. Many of us don't know what legal design is about, and more importantly, how it can actually transform the way that we communicate with our clients and the value that it can bring in transforming and improving the experience in how legal information can be more digestible and more relatable. But that's all I'm going to say for now on this topic. I'm just going to make a few quick introductions for our host tonight, starting with Naoko Adachi, Associate at Herbert Smith Freehills, also an ex-com member of Women in Law Japan. We also have tonight Maria Abe, an Associate at Vanguard Lawyers Tokyo and one of our amazing volunteers for Women in Law Japan. And last but not least, Daryl Osage, Senior Manager at Legal Ops at JILA. With that, I'm going to hand over to Naoko to make a few more introductions. Naoko.
Hi, I'm Naoko Adachi. I'm an executive committee member of Women in Law Japan. It is great to have this collaborative event tonight and have a wide range of audience. I'd like to invite the presidents and representatives of the organizations to say a few words. First, I'd like to invite Mr. Kenji Tagaya. He's an executive officer, general counsel, head of legal group at JILA. JILA is kindly sponsoring this event. I'll now pass the screen to Mr. Tagaya.
Thank you, Naoko-san. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending this event. I feel very privileged to have received such a positive response to this event, and I would like to express my sincere thanks to from the bottom of my heart for the collaboration with various organizations. Legal design is something we, JILA, has been working on for the last few years. As we all share the feelings, the corporate legal department, no matter how good our work may be, our service may be to the business or to the top management, if we don't express our outcome, achievements in a good way, nobody will recognize, particularly corporate president, the board of directors. They may not fully appreciate the value of the corporate legal department. And therefore, in addition to the main work of providing legal advice, or even corporate governance, compliance work, in our company at JILA, we have been making significant effort to improve our, how to communicate and also the legal design. And I would like you, everyone who participates today, to take away, at least something, not from maybe JILA example, but the experienced speakers of tonight, so that you may have better idea for tomorrow or the future of your respective organizations. So once again, thank you so much for your attendance. Thank you so much for your valuable time in this busy evening time. And please enjoy. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tagaya. Now, we'd like to hear from Women's in Law Japan, Ms. Catherine O'Connell, the president. She is principal at Catherine O'Connell Law and Audit and Supervisory Board member at Fujitsu. Catherine, please come to the screen.
Thanks, Naoko, and thank you, Tagaya-san. And we really are looking forward tonight to hear JIRA's legal design case study. Well, I was thinking a little bit earlier, as lawyers, we tend to lack a full understanding of our clients' needs, and we're really very much driven by being lawyer-centric and system-centric. But I really believe that as lawyers, it's about human centricity and about empathy that really makes us have great legal work. And these concepts are absolutely central to legal design, but probably not so central to us traditionally in the law. I had a bit of research and I found out that Margaret Hagan was the person who brilliantly described legal design as getting a new pair of glasses to look at the world. And the new glasses put the lens on the clients rather than the lens on us as lawyers and the systems that lawyers work in. And I know from following Sarah on LinkedIn and seeing her work product that as our workshop presented tonight, she is going to inspire us to all start to work differently in the way we act and interact with our external and internal clients. Sarah's on a true mission to help lawyers and their legal processes have a human and customer experience and incorporate that into the work that we do. So tonight, let's have this concept of a new pair of glasses as we participate in this workshop and think about how we can deliver legal services a little bit differently to satisfy our clients. Let's imagine putting those glasses on right now and see what we can do to see how it feels. Daryl just took his glasses off and put a new pair back on. There we go. Who knows where this could lead us to in our exciting way that we deliver services to our clients. That's all from me. Thanks, Naoko.
Thank you very much, Catherine. From the Japan In-House Counsel Network, we'd like to invite Ms. Akiko Kikuchi, the co-president. She is Senior Operating Officer and General Counsel at Bayer Holding. Akiko, please come to the screen.
Thank you, Naoko. So I'm General Counsel at Bayer in Japan and also the co-president for JICN. I would like to welcome all the JICN members who are attending tonight and like to thank WILJ and JILA for the collaboration that you're allowing us to take part in. And of course, a special thanks to JERA for your generosity for hosting this event tonight. We are about 300 lawyers, legal professionals strong at JICN, and we usually have very hardcore legal topics that we cover in our events, normally hosted by law firms. So tonight, I would say, is a nice change, and it should allow us to brush up on our soft skills side. When I think about internal in-house legal services these days, it's increasingly important to be able to communicate clearly, concisely, understand the business team's goals and pain points, and really, to have that ability to put yourself in their shoes. So I think that is not so different to what Catherine is saying about, the other pair of glasses that we need to be able to put on. So we at Bayer are always thriving to be able to achieve that. But I think the workshop today, hopefully, all of us together, myself included, will allow us to pick up a few tips that will help us get closer to that goal, and hopefully allow us to implement that starting from tomorrow. So again, thank you all for coming, and I hope you enjoy. That's all from me.
Thank you very much, Akiko. From the Japan In-House Lawyers Association, we'd like to invite Ms. Akiko Kawaguchi. She is Assistant Division Director of Legal and General Affairs Division at JILA Corporation. Akiko, please come to the screen.
I am another Akiko from the Japan In-House Lawyers Association with the 2,000 plus members and who are qualified in Japan and who are or were working as the in-house counsel. And I am so privileged, and I should say that all the attendees are so lucky, and they are so ahead of the new era where that we have to work with AI as a good colleague. And by the way, that I am keen, always I'm dreaming of the learning mathematics while I'm very bad at mathematics, and I really love mathematics for sure. And I always tried to open the book of mathematics. However, always I am defeated by the difficulty and the two special words that they try to deliver, and they believe that it is the easiest way for everybody to understand. However, it is not the case, and through my own experience, that I understand that even if we are dreaming of understanding the meaning, and even if we are appreciating the value of certain subject, still sometimes because of the way of the presentation, we are puzzled. And probably that today's lecture will navigate us how to present our mysterious legal jargon to the management, or someone who are really keen to understand us, but still they are struggling to understand. Thank you very much, and I am too excited, so that I have to return my mic to the lecturers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Akiko. Today's speaker is Ms. Sarah Ouis. Sarah is an experienced legal design consultant. She previously worked as an in-house lawyer for 7 years before she starting her entrepreneurship journey. Her LinkedIn page has extensive information about her, and I particularly enjoyed reading her experience page, as it's full of excitement and struggles from each experience, which everyone can relate. As a legal design consultant, she assists legal teams and legal service providers transform the delivery of legal services with legal design. She assists her clients to improve the usability and accessibility of legal information through different mediums, from contracts to policies to legal opinions. Her client base includes multi-million-dollar companies from different industries, law firms, and legal operation consultancies. Sarah is also a very influential legal professional on social media with over 20,000 followers on LinkedIn alone, and content that reaches millions of views. After Sarah's presentation and case study, it will be 10 to 15 minutes of time for Q&A. So please feel free to pop questions into the chat. I will now hand over to Sarah for her presentation.
Well, thank you so much. This was a wonderful presentation of everything that has been going on in my life over the past few years. So I'm super pleased to be with you today. Thank you so much, all the Japanese legal community, for having me. And I'm super excited to be the first speaker to really bring legal design to the masses in Japan. So thank you so much, all the association. Thank you, JIRA, for the support as well. So I will start sharing my screen. Of course, if you have any issues, let me know. So you should now see the agenda. So this is what we are going to go through today. So going through the back to the basics of what legal design is, and in particular human-centered design. How does this apply to legal services, to the day-to-day we do as legal professionals, either in-house or in private practice? What are the tangible business outcomes? Because that is something that comes up very regularly around what's the value add behind doing all of this. And the other skills that you might need along the way, especially when it comes to communicating information differently. We'll then finally pursue with a case study. So without further ado, let's get going. Before that, I have a couple of questions for you. So I will ask you in a few moments to define who you are, what is your job, what are you in business for? And for that, we will jump on a quiz. So I'm going to share another page with you, which contains the quiz. Let me know again if you have any issues. So can you see a fun icebreaker? Or are you still seeing the quiz? Perfect, wonderful. Okay, so what I'm asking you to do now is basically, you can either go to menti.com with your phone or your computer and you can enter the code, or you can use your phone to directly scan the QR code. So I'm going to leave you a few seconds. I can see that some people have started to connect, so that's wonderful. And we will start with our first questions and really see what comes up. Wonderful. We have a couple of people joined. I'm going to give you 10 more seconds and we will move to the next and the first question. So go to menti.com and enter the code or use the QR code. Might be quicker. All right. Let's get going. So, we already have a couple of answers. So there is a reference to a very famous American actor here, Nicolas Cage. If you are not familiar with him, that's fine. It's really just to break the ice and get you to experiment the tool as well. So on a scale from Nicolas to Cage, how are you? I suspect a lot of stressed lawyers in the room. So let's see what comes up. We have a lot of focused lawyers in the room. We have a couple of people struggling with the bees. So again, that's a reference to Nicolas Cage, one of the movies. A couple of people are excited. Okay. So far, it seems like the vast majority of you are seeming quite relaxed and focused. Not surprising for lawyers. We have one person who's carefree. That's good to know. It doesn't happen very often with lawyers. Wonderful. Okay, perfect. So that's giving me the indication that everyone is now on the tool. So that's amazing. All right, so let's move to the next question. And I hope you enjoyed this very quick icebreaker. So now I'm going to ask you to finish this sentence. I am in business too, and I want you to really define what your responsibilities are. How do you perceive your job? Interesting. So we already have a couple of answers. I'm in business too, so let's see what we have. So help people, effectively help my clients' needs, helping. So there's a lot of helpers in the legal industry. I want people to be happy. Interesting. So we have one very interesting insight here: provide litigation support to law firms and Japanese corporation. So this would be a very a typical response that we have. Be a part of a team delivering world-leading projects, make people's jobs easier, have a happy time where I work, practice as a lawyer as long as I maintain my current level of income. Okay, put out fires. That must be an in-house counsel here. Protect the business, add value to my client's life. Okay, so there's a lot of reference to clients, help our internal clients, support clients with legal issues, etc. Very interesting. Okay, so we typically have a mix of people who are in business to help others, people who are in business to help their clients. So there's almost like a duty really behind the lawyer's responsibilities to help others. There's an element of impact and an element of transformational outcome, people to be happy, make a difference, make people's lives easier. So there's this element that, go a bigger purpose of just providing legal work. This is very good. This is very good. And then there is obviously the more transactional aspect of answers, move transactions smoothly, support clients with legal issues, etc. Delivering world-leading projects. So we have the more transactional type of answers. Okay, great. So very interesting. Thank you so much, everyone, for all of your insights. And now I'm going to go back to the slides. Right. So I'm going to start the introduction to this workshop with this, is the fact that the way we deliver legal services are broken, right? And the reason is, I was pleasantly surprised, I must say, by all the answers, because there is this element of helping, there is this element of big purpose, as you've outlined. So I'm pleasantly surprised by it. And you would be very surprised by how many times I've had interactions with lawyers, and when I ask them what their job is, they are here to provide, they are in business to provide legal advice. That's the number one thing that comes out. I'm in business to provide legal advice, and you have variation. I'm in business to provide exceptional legal services, etc., etc. I'm in business to provide high quality legal advice. So I was pleasantly surprised to see that it isn't, at least in this audience, it doesn't seem to be as obvious. But here is the thing: the vast majority of lawyers, from my experience, really describe their job as the means, as what they do on a daily basis, provide legal advice. And to give you an example, I was speaking to one of my clients. So she's an employment lawyer, a partner, and when I've asked her, what does keep you, who is it that you're serving? She responded, I'm serving HR professional. Okay. When was the last time you had a one-on-one with your clients just to talk about them? Forget about projects, just to talk about them. She said, I've never had any one-on-one to talk about them only. It was always related to a particular project. And then I've asked her, okay, well, how are you helping your clients? Do you know what keeps them awake at night? And she said to me something that really struck. She said, I'm a bit ashamed to respond this, but I have been a partner for 13 years, and I can't tell you what keeps my clients awake at night. All we do is provide employment, legal advice. I've never really thought about what's the bigger picture, what's the bigger problems that keep my HR professionals awake at night. So now we are going to go back to the quiz because I want to ask you. I want to ask you about your opinion. So I want you to tell me, when was the last time you asked a client about the one thing that keeps them awake at night? When was the last time you had this one-on-one conversation with your clients, unrelated to a live project, just to talk to your clients, what's going on, etc. So far, the majority of people respond, I never asked, which is the norm, by the way. And then this is followed by last year. So the last one-on-one catch-up you had last year. Oh, last week. Okay, last week is coming second. Very good. Very good. So last week, last month, and fourth last year. Interesting. Okay. So that's very interesting. So it almost seems like we have a bit of the opposite here. So the vast majority who never really asked their client this question. There's some who are really onto it and asked not so long ago. So that's interesting. So it seems like we have a bit of a mix here. So the bottom line is, this is the vast majority. And I'm pretty sure I could do this statistic again over 1,000 people, I would get a very similar type of answer. So most of you wouldn't necessarily ask this type of question because you are just buried in your day-to-day, right? You know, you are busy, you have things to deliver. And as far as we are concerned, we're here to provide high-quality legal services. That's the way we have been trained. Now let's move to the next question I have for you, and the last one, before we dive into the workshop. When was the last time you had a one-on-one with a client to talk about them only? Them only, unrelated to a project. So this should, the results should be pretty similar. So far the first wins. Okay, so when was your last one-on-one catch-up that is unrelated to a project? All right. So very similar trend. Very similar trend. So the never wins, followed by, oh, last month, okay. Interesting. So it seems like the vast majority of you are having conversations with your clients on a regular basis, but you are not necessarily asking questions on a deeper level. What keeps you awake at night? Forget about this employment contract or what keeps you awake at night. So it seems like you have one-on-one catch-ups about clients, to talk about them, what's going on, but you've never really asked deeper questions. That's what I'm gathering roughly from this poll. Very useful. Very useful. All right, well, thank you so much. So with that in mind, obviously, this is a typical issue, right? So I was telling you about one of my clients, the employment lawyer, and she isn't the only one. We could see that in the polls. This is where legal design comes in. Legal design comes in as a fix to broken legal services. Now, it might sound very foreign to you, and especially if you hear design, you might think about visualization and graphics and things like that. But the reality is, legal design is much more than that. It's a problem-solving method. It is the application of human-centered design, or what we also call design thinking, to solve clients' problems. And it works in a very different way to what we are used to, right? So the way we currently solve problems in the legal industry is that we are faced with a problem and we answer by the letter of the law, our policies, our legal documents, etc. Right? So, and as part of that, we tend to make a lot of assumptions, right? So we tend to always answer similar problems in a very similar way, no matter who is on the other side. So we don't really have a tailored approach to our delivery of legal services. We have a problem, we apply a solution. This is the way it has always worked. Hello. Based on those assumptions, and then we provide the relevant solution. So in-house is a typical, to give you a concrete example, if we are faced with a process problem, so the business isn't following the rules, so let's say the delegation of signature process, we are going to assume that they do not understand it. And therefore, a quick fix is going to send a reminder email to follow the rules. We jump straight into the assumptions and therefore solutions without thinking that there might be something else doing. For law firms, but we are faced, could be that you are faced with the problems about one client is a bit confused about how to establish their businesses in Japan. The assumption is, well, let's provide a 50 pages guidance because what they need is a comprehensive guidance on all the possible options, right? So let's send a memo with all the possibilities available. And that's a true story. I've faced it myself. I have received a lot of legal memos, very long-winded. And the reality is, if I had been asked maybe, well, you know, how much time do you have? How busy are you? I would have been like, well, I'm too busy putting fires. I just want to know what's the most straightforward way of establishing the activities in another jurisdiction. So that's the way we currently solve problems. Problem, assumption, solution. Design thinking works in a very different way. In this methodology, the human is at the core. So whoever you are serving, your client, is at the core of your solution. And in order for you to understand who is it that you're serving, you have to research. You have to research their needs. You have to research their feelings. What keeps them awake at night? This famous question I've asked you in the beginning. And this is where you start. And from there, you start drawing some conclusions, and then you start developing tailor-made solutions. And you start testing them. They are not designed to be perfect. They are designed to be tested as soon as possible based on clients' feedback. And then you iterate along the way. You know, you come up with a V1, V2, and so on. And that's really the cycle. So let's say you have client 1 and client 2 with a very similar legal problem. Because they are 2 different people, you will provide 2 different solutions potentially. This is what legal design is. So I'm going to dive through the methodology that sits behind this principle. So the design thinking methodology. There's 5 stages. And as I was telling you, it's all about the user first. It's all about the client. You start from there. And in order to understand how the client feels, you need to show empathy. And it's not surprising that empathize is the first stage of that process. So let's go through empathy. What does it mean? Well, showing empathy is really trying to figure out who the client is, try to understand them at their core. What are their major pain points and challenges? And you do that by asking them questions, asking them open-ended questions. And the idea behind sitting with your clients and asking them open-ended questions is to remove assumptions, remove yourself from the picture, ignore what you think you know about your clients, you let them talk, and you guide them through open-ended questions. And you do that because what you're looking for is insights. You're trying to not guide them to answer in a certain way. You're just searching for insights, you're fishing around information. So these are typically not yes or no answers. They would typically start with, tell me how are you feeling? And this is how you start gathering insight. So here are a couple of examples, right? What do you do when receiving our memo? What is the next step? So you let them talk about what are their responsibilities in relation to a process. If you are trying to solve a problem in relation to a particular process, in-house, for example, so here is a typical question you could ask. Tell me about your experience sending contracts for signature. How does it feel, right? So open-ended questions, you're searching for insights. If it's in relation to a document, so you would ask what we call product-related questions. How do you feel about our delegation of authority policy? Right, so you start fishing around information, you remove your biases. At the empathy stage, it's all about understanding your clients and how they feel and what the challenges are. And from there, you start figuring out who is it that you're talking to, who are you problem solving for? right? So let's say that your client base are general counsels. What do they have in common besides the job titles? What are their common frustrations and goals and interests? And then you start building your persona. So here is a typical persona for in-house teams dealing with salespeople. Here is your typical sales director guy, Mike WILJ. Mike WILJ is extremely frustrated by the turnaround time of contracts. He needs his contract to be turned around faster because he's got quarterly objectives and he's got team objectives on an annual basis. And he is money driven, obviously. He earns a good salary, but he also earns commission. So you start figuring out who is it that you're talking to and what makes them who they are. What are they driven by? Is it money? Are they conscious of doing good quality work, etc.? So you start putting together this persona of the people fitting your audience to understand who you are talking to. Here is another one for law firms. Here is Elena, a general counsel, right? So a general counsel typically has annual objectives. She's been asked again to reduce the legal budget by 25%. She's very busy trying to transform the legal function to keep up with the business. She needs to do more with less. She wished she had 48 hours in a day. General counsel in the room, let me know if it's inaccurate, but that's the typical user persona exercise. You try to figure out who is it that you're talking to at their core, what keeps them awake at night, what are their frustrations and goals, and from there you start figuring out what the problem is, right? So that's the define stage. So you've spoken to your ideal clients, you figure out who they are, what their challenges are, etc. From this point forward, you start filtering down the information. What is the problem? What is the problem that I'm trying to solve here, right? And you do that by organizing and analyzing everything you've collected at the empathy stage. And the reason you do that is so that you don't start developing solutions that are completely unrelated. It's easy to lose track when you have too much information going on. So you need to come up with what we call a problem statement. A problem statement looks like this. So how might we, that's how it starts. How might we insert the problem you're trying to solve so that our clients, so typical audience, can achieve a particular outcome? And it's designed in such a way that really filter, again, or limit the risk for you going all sorts of directions. And you try to really focus on the problem at hand for the population, the clients you're serving, and in order for them to achieve a particular outcome. So these are examples for both law firms or in-house. So if it's in-house, how might we accelerate our turnaround time so that our sales team can better achieve their end of quarter targets? Private practice, how might we provide cost-effective legal services so that our GC clients can stay on budget? So very well defined, very targeted at a particular issue. So now that you've defined the problem, then you start thinking about potential ways of solving that problem. That's the ideation stage. At the ideation stage, you really try to generate as many ideas as possible. The idea is to get your creativity up and running and not being perfect or right, but just try all sorts of things. So you try generating ideas. You can do that through brainstorming, and there are other techniques such as the worst possible idea or even Scamper. I will go through that in a minute. But the idea is to generate as many potential solutions as possible. Let go of perfectionism, let go of being right. The idea is to get you up and running. I love the worst possible idea exercise because it's quite fun. There is nothing too ridiculous. It liberates people's mind. And also, when you've thought about the worst possible idea that could solve that problem, you know where not to go. And you have a better direction of where to go. So I've done that with the legal team. And so the issue was, so the problem we were trying to solve was around salespeople and how can we better serve them. And the worst possible ideas the team came up with was, well, let's send them back to law school, or let's send them to law school. Let's do a law school lecture, right? So that was the worst possible idea, but it gave the legal team the direction that you shouldn't try to reproduce a law school experience to a population of salespeople. So that's always worst possible idea. And then you have Scamper. So Scamper, you try to list all of your solutions and then you play around with them, right? So you can substitute what can be replaced as part of those solutions or as part of your existing processes, what can be combined, what can be brought together. So for example, right now you have 5 templates, and what about doing just one and remove complexity? What can be added, enhanced, adapted in the way you do things? What can be modified? What can be put to other use? What could be eliminated? We think a lot about creating, but we don't think as much about eliminating something that might be redundant in the way we do things. What could be reversed engineered, reordered, etc. So that's the Scamper technique. So you take your solutions and you try to play around with them. So here are some examples. So for the in-house problems, the worst possible idea, obviously, to accelerate the turnaround time would be to add extra bottlenecks, approvals. Another at the start of the brainstorming stage, you could think about creating a fast-track process for the end of quarter target, or you could look at digitizing certain processes. For law firms, in order for you to provide effective, cost-effective legal services, you could think about proposing a smaller deliverable, changing the way you bill, so moving away from the billable hour and propose a subscription model. Obviously, the worst possible idea would be double the hourly rate, right? So you know where not to go from that point onwards. So you start generating as many ideas as possible, and then you prototype. At the prototype stage, you only pick one or a few, right? So the idea is to start building as quickly as possible and come up with a version 1 of whatever idea seems the most effective or the most doable. So you generate those ideas, you pick the best one, and you start building it, you start creating a V1. And the idea behind that is, again, to identify the best possible solution as quickly as possible and go out and test it. Because otherwise your lawyer brain is going to hinder you and you are going to spend 6 months trying to come up with the best solution. But until you've tested it, until you've put it to your ideal clients and see if it works, you will never know. So you have to come up with a version 1 of whatever you want to achieve, So a particular V1 could potentially be to accelerate a contract turnaround time, would be reduce the size of the contracts, make it shorter, and have one dedicated process for one contract type only. That is your V1. For law firms, it could be, again, this smaller deliverable packaged in a subscription service, but just for one client. You test it on one client, you get some feedback, and this allows you to then iterate, right? So you test. So you go ahead, you create your version 1, and then you test. And that's how you know if you are heading towards the right direction or if things need to change. So the idea here is really to improve your solution, get as much feedback as possible. Again, you really go ahead with your version 1 with an open mind in order to get your ideal customers' insights. And then from there, from that point forward onwards, you start refining. So as part of the testing, obviously, what gets measured gets improved. So something that you could easily potentially test is the average turnaround time if you are in-house, right? Since we have introduced this V1 of our fast track process, how short has it become since? What's the customer feedback? If you are in a law firm and you want to provide cost-effective legal services, well, has the customer budget exceeded, or have we been on track with that? And again, what's the customer feedback? So there are a couple of things that you can start measuring and as part of your testing to see if it works and if it doesn't. And obviously from there, you iterate based on feedback. So this is design thinking applied to legal services. So you move away from perfection start understanding your customer base at their core, the challenges they have, you create solutions, you start testing them, and then you iterate along the way. So it's a very different shape. It's a very different way of delivering legal services, but ultimately it pays off in the long run, and which is my point here about business outcomes. So what are the business outcomes? Well, first, you are saving time in the long run, because you are no longer spending too much time trying to develop something that no one needs, no one cares. You are no longer wasting your time developing a process that won't be followed, for example. You identify the opportunities as well, because by knowing what the problems, what people's problems are, you are able to address them. You are able to identify the hidden gems, the hidden opportunities that you wouldn't have addressed if you hadn't asked those questions. So you can identify opportunities on the back of those interviews. It's going to make you money, because again, people don't put big money into small things. If you can solve $1 million problem, you will make $1 million on the back of that, right? So the bigger the problem, the more expensive it becomes, because you are solving real problems for your customer. And ultimately, you are building trust. You are building trust because you are able to understand your customers in such a way that no one else can. So you are building trust by adding value. So here is a couple of business outcomes. Now, obviously, back to the various, so legal design really comes through different forms. I've talked about the methodology, but from there you have different families. You have process design in order to develop client-centric processes, service design for client-centric services. My angle is information, so how to develop contract policies, etc. So legal information, again, that is client-centric, and that moves away from the typical day-to-day legal communication that we know today. So legal information design is just that. It's all about creating effective and client-centric communication to improve the understanding of legal information. And this applies to contracts, to regulatory updates, case law, legal opinions, anything that looks like a legal document, you could apply legal information design to it. Now, the reason it's important is obviously, as we know, outside of lawyers, very little, very small amount of the population probably knows or understands legal information. So that's why it matters, right? We have to become an accessible profession, and we have to overcome the perception issues. There is a reason why we are perceived as being inaccessible, and it all starts from the way we present ourselves, the way we write our emails, the way we communicate. And we can no longer afford to be this way, because businesses are becoming increasingly competitive. We have to move fast. In order for those decisions to be made quickly, we need to obviously make sure that we deliver accordingly. So delivering information that is quickly understood or complied with goes a long way. So I'm going to walk you through a couple of examples for some of my projects. So this was an interactive training design that I've designed for a legal team in the energy sector. Oh, sorry. This is an NDA that I've redesigned for a technology company. So the idea really, again, was to enable NDAs to be filled out a lot quicker, and therefore saving time and money to the organization in the long run, and make it a lot more engaging and on brand as well. This is a privacy notice in the retail sector. As you can see, a pizza that has different toppings, and it presents the privacy information in a way that is much more relevant to the industry. Visual communication, so JILA will cover what we've done as part of the newsletter, but that's typical visual communication here to talk about what's going on in-house, what the legal team is up to, introduction of the team, sharing some data and so forth. This is my own contract. So this is an interactive click-through contract So this is my coaching agreement. And as you can see here, basically what's going to happen is if you click on the tabs on the top, it's going to open a new page. So this is a much more interactive and easy to follow way of signing an agreement. So in a nutshell, a couple of projects, but JIRA will have the opportunity to present that as well. What I want to emphasize is beyond design thinking, there are other skills for information design specifically that you need in order to conduct a good legal information design project, which is my angle. So law school doesn't teach us, it does teach us the legal reasoning. It does give us the foundation to apply the law, but there is a lot of things that law school doesn't teach us. And therefore we enter the market not really knowing what makes a great legal practitioner, right? So, and in order to communicate effectively, we need a lot more than just a law degree. So in order to create user-friendly, client-centric legal materials, you need a couple of more skills. You need information architecture, you need plain language, and you finally need visual design. So information architecture is all about how you structure and present your information. So it's really important, I think, as lawyers, we tend to go into the details a lot because this is how we've been trained. Information architecture really consists of defining a sort of hierarchy of information. What is important, what isn't? And how should I present this information? In what order? What comes first, second, and third? This is information architecture. And it all starts from knowing that not all information is made equal. Again, as lawyers, we try to put everything, we want to be as accurate as possible, but is this information actually relevant for my clients? Do my clients have any need to know or need to use this information? Are my clients going to actively use the information I'm sharing? If the answer is no, then this information doesn't belong there. It doesn't matter that it's accurate, your client doesn't need it, and therefore you will end up letting go of it. And the way I usually present it is you really have to look at your materials and identify what is a must. What is it that my client needs? Not what you think they need, what they need based on what they've told you. And that goes as a must. So if you're dealing with a procurement officer, chances are that they will need anything to do with supply management, right? So any rebates in terms of volume of work that we are giving them, the payment terms, any form of approvals that they might need in order to onboard a supplier. On the other hand, certain things will go to the graveyard. Things around limitation of liability, IP assignment, change of control provision, these are very legal related information in contracts. A procurement officer doesn't need that on a day-to-day basis. They don't negotiate the contract. They are not, and even less the legal provisions. Therefore, really identify what's important to them, what they need, and let go of the rest. That is information selection. And from there, you start structuring your information in a way that is relevant. But picking the relevant information isn't enough, because at the end of the day, you have to convey the information in a easy to understand, powerful manner. And that's where plain language comes into play. So what is plain language? So a couple of fundamentals. You need to understand who you are talking to. Again, going back to this client centricity, who is it that you're talking to? What do they already know? What do they need to know? What is it that they might ignore and therefore they might ask you questions about? So try to anticipate their needs based on the research you've done. What should you say in order for them to pay attention? How can you get them closer to the goals with the information that you produce? Number two, if you have different audiences, if you have a GC and then senior legal counsel and paralegals, well, don't merge all of the different information in the same document. Try to create different places to address different people. Because again, no one wants to go through 10 pages where only one is relevant for them, right? So create different documents or create different sections. Different audiences require different location for the information to be dropped. Number 3, the way you organize information is important. The most important information to your audience should come first. Anything else around exceptions, conditions, anything that is very narrow in terms of relevance and importance should come last. Because again, you don't want someone to read one page only to come up with what's the most important aspect at the end of the page. Talk to one person. Yes, what you might produce can apply to a wider group of people, but there is only one person at a time reading the information. So talk to the person as if you were in front of them. So use you instead of they or he or she. Okay, so always talk to one person because the person feels a lot more involved as part of the message. Make it short and descriptive. Something that we see often in contracts is the fact that we use headings that might make sense to lawyers when they review documents on a regular basis, but might not make sense to anyone else, right? So you could easily replace termination by how can you end this contract? To the point, anyone outside legal can understand what is it that you're talking about, much more descriptive. Or what we agree to do could be used instead of scope, right? The active voice, something that somehow we love doing in legal documents is a passive voice, such as the following information must be included. Well, use the active voice. Again, speak to your reader. Can you see the difference between the information in red and the information in green? The following information must be included versus you must include the following information. In one case, it kind of feels redundant and long-winded. The other case feels a lot more active. You must do this. Another one, payment will be withheld until full compliance versus we will suspend payment until you comply. So very subtle changes can really make a big difference in the way you communicate. Shorten your sentences as possible, and a good way to do that is use direct verb and present tense. So instead of saying please apply, instead of saying please make an application, please apply, instead of saying please make payments, hey, right? Don't use shall. No one uses shall in real life. Use must. Allow yourself to be approximate. Sometimes it's okay. You can use privacy law instead of GDPR if no one knows, or no one in your audience is familiar with it. Remove anything that is unnecessary. On a monthly basis, you don't need to say that. You can say monthly. Be responsible for can be replaced by must. So really try to cut the word count and replace it with simple words. Remove legal jargon, remove legalese. No one needs another here and after. Therefore, try to replace this information by everyday words that everyone can understand. So finally, a quick run through visual design principles, which is another skill that you need. So I'm going to walk you through a couple of things that you can quickly do in your contract, and that's applying visual design principles. Whether you look at a contract, a privacy policy, a memo, whatever the support is, visual design principles can allow you to create more engaging documents. So let's start with the alignment. The alignment is all about telling the order in which the information must be consumed in a document. So you bring visual order and you are telling your reader, this is the way you should consume the information. So for example, if we look at the NDA, it's pretty obvious that the information must be consumed from top to bottom, left to right? So, so that's the alignment right here for you. It gives, and it really works with hierarchy, which is another design principle we are going to go through quickly. Repetition. So repetition is all about repeating patterns, creating some sort of familiarity around things that are similar, right? So let's say that you are using a certain terminology, a title, you will want to use the same font, the same colors for similar type of information. And again, it might feel very foreign right now, but can you see, if we look back at the NDA, that I'm using the same font weight in capital letters for the description of each party. So the parties, business details, and legal details. I'm using exactly the same font for a reason, because it's the same type of information. That is repetition. Another one, the repetitive use of icons, so that we clearly identify that we are in a new section. The use of color, so that it creates a certain identity. We know that we are in the same document. So that is repetition. You could use that without your everyday legal memos and contract and so forth. The use of contrast. So contrast is really important to create emphasis and impact. So to highlight certain parts of the agreement, or to tell your reader these are two different types of information. So you can create contrast with the size of the font you're using, the change in colors, so warm, cool colors, the change in fonts, etc. So here you can see, if we look back at the NDA, the contrast between the party 1 and party 2. I'm purposely using two different colors to contrast and tell the reader these are different types of information. Can you see also, obviously, the contrast between the background color for confidentiality agreement and the color of the font? Again, that is to create emphasis around the type of contract that it is. Next one, hierarchy. So extremely important when we deal with legal information, because at the end of the day, not everything is made equal. So in order for you to tell the reader what is the most important thing, what comes second, what comes next, you have to create a sense of hierarchy. And you also do this with contrast, obviously, but creating a sense of relationship, this is where you start, this is what comes second, etc., can really go a long way. So you can create hierarchy with the size. So the larger items, so larger fonts, larger letters are likely to be seen first. Contrast, obviously, if you use a very strong contrast somewhere, it's likely to stand out. And obviously the position. If you put something at the top of a document, it's likely to be more important than something at the end. And to demonstrate how you can create hierarchy even with font size, can you see on this picture how accurate it is that you will read this first? And then you will read this line next. That is hierarchy, nothing else. That is literally using font size to tell the reader, this is where you start reading. This is where you read second. And then the paragraph on the right will be read next, etc. That is hierarchy right there. So you can use that with, again, your legal information pretty much right away. So as you can see in the contract, the confidentiality agreement title pretty much stands out. And it tells the reader, this is the type of contract, this is the number 1 information you need to know. Number 2, the party names. Number 3, the business information. This is hierarchy. Balance. The idea is to create behind it a pretty stable, structured contract or policy, or whatever you're creating has to be nicely balanced. You don't want to create an overwhelming feeling, which tends to happen in legal documents. Everything is in small font. There is no sense of hierarchy. It seems to be very all over the place. So balance, you can really use balance, for example, by trying to imagine an invisible line across the document. And if does it like flow nicely? So as you can see, the top of the document seems to be much more heavy than the bottom, but it's okay because it is contrasted by the use of white space. So overall, you have a balanced document. So these are very quickly a couple of visual design principles that you can apply right away if you want to design better legal information. But ultimately, as a conclusion, to create legal services that clients love, well, you have to speak to your clients. I know you already do this, you've proven this on the call, but you have to ask them about what keeps them awake at night. You have to ask them open-ended questions. And then from there, you define what the problem is. What is it that you are trying to solve for your clients? Come up with ideas. They don't need to be perfect. Generate as many as possible. Get a V1 out and test it as soon as possible. And from customers' insight, iterate based on feedback. That's the recipe for good design thinking. But beyond that, it's really a mindset shift that needs to take place in legal professionals. You have to move away from perfectionism and be iterative. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to iterate, and ask questions. It's okay not to be the lawyer in the room. It's okay not to know something. Ask questions and be curious about your customers. Let go of perfectionism. Learn about new skills, plain language, visual design, and to create user-centric, client-centric legal materials. And do not be another legal technician in the room, focusing on delivering legal services, because ultimately legal services are a byproduct of a business outcome. So really focus on becoming a problem solver for what truly keeps your clients awake at night. Thank you very much.
Sarah, thank you very much. That was very interesting. Can everyone hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. You know, we've been at JIRA, we've been, as Tagaya-san mentioned, sort of applying principles of legal design consciously and unconsciously. And I think that's where, you know, I found you and tapped into your talents on LinkedIn. So I'll just spend 5 minutes on a case study for JIRA. And for those of you who don't know or not familiar with JIRA, we are a Japanese energy company headquartered here in Tokyo. Daryl, yeah.
I'm sharing.
That's okay. I was just waiting for the slides to come up. Yep. Can go to the next one, perhaps. We are headquartered in Tokyo. We have international subsidiaries across the globe. The legal function here in HQ only has a headcount of about 30, but group-wide, we have about 55 and growing very quickly. Just about a year ago, we formally created the legal ops function. And from our viewpoint, legal operations is a crossroad between law and innovation. So our team's job is really to bring about change and change that drives efficiencies and digitalization. One of the key changes that we wanted to put on our roadmap is really to innovate the way that legal communicates with the business and other functions. And there really are a number of initiatives that falls out of that change goal. And the key one for us is to change the way that the company understands legal's role. As Kawakichi-san mentioned, you know, we want to make sure that to change the perception about legal department being a necessary evil, speaking a different language, and that legal content is very difficult to understand. And at the same time, we wanted to raise the level of legal literacy and to make legal content more relatable and digestible and easy and palatable to consume. So the medium that we chose is a legal newsletter and the method legal design. So working with Sarah's team, we produced a publication to showcase the legal corporate governance and compliance knowledge and information. We also showcase our legal members and our team's initiatives and achievements. The concept of a legal newsletter is really not new or novel. And I'm sure that many of you probably have a group newsletter or legal newsletter. But what is really different is that we worked with Sarah's team to apply legal design, the graphic design, the principles that you just heard about, to make our content really very attractive to the eye, attention grabbing, and easily digestible. Because in this age of information, where we are really constantly bombarded with traditional print, with emails, with social media, with visual and audio, we're competing for a very, very, we think, narrow bandwidth attention from our commercial colleagues, our executives. So our communications has to grab attention, have an impact, as well as be relevant and informative. Otherwise, we don't attract and we don't retain readers. We're also using different methods of dissemination in addition to the traditional company-wide emails and notice boards. So for example, we have a single click-through banner on our portal, our company intranet portal. And we also turn the newsletters into a PPT format and have that sort of flash through our TV screens that are in the office. So just, you know, maximizing that exposure and giving different ways that the business can consume the information. We first piloted the newsletter in summer last year, and we've been tracing our readership rates since then so that we can analyze the data and better understand how, you know, what content is attractive, as well as other factors like that may affect uptake, like the timing of a launch coinciding with a major corporate event that could reduce or take attention away. And from that, we can make more informed decisions about how to make improvements and, you know, better achieve our objectives. Very interestingly, we've only had 4 editions, but the data shows that our most popular edition so far is the D&I edition, which is on the previous slide, I think, Daryl. Okay, here we conveyed the legal group's diversity. So on the left-hand side there of that slide. And we also covered very substantive legal content like insider trading. I think that's on the next slide, sorry, Daryl. And the launch of the One NDA in JIRA. And for that edition, we achieved over 1,000 views, which is approximately 1 in 4 employees. I think in our books, that's pretty good. One unexpected feedback that I'll close with that we've received from HR as well as our global subsidiaries is that they actually use our newsletter as part of the recruitment effort to show topics like our diversity, the Global Legal Forum, which we have, to convey that the legal function is an innovative and forward-thinking and progressive department. And those are the words that we do want associated with the JIRA's legal group. And that's the end of the case study. I'll hand over to Maria for questions and answers.
Thank you, Angela, and definitely thank you, Sarah, for that enlightening presentation. It's really eye-opening to see how we can present legal information in a way that non-legal people can follow and understand what's going on. I particularly liked I loved your method of how you empathize and then define the concepts, ideate, and then, you know, create the prototype and then test them out. That kind of gives us a structure of how to go forward with using the information you presented. And then the more practical tips of using things like contrast and, you know, larger fonts, smaller fonts, and balancing visually how we can proceed with conveying this information. So thank you very much for that presentation. And then Angela, thank you for sharing those examples that really helped us get an understanding of how Sarah's information and advice is portrayed in the real world. In terms of some questions, let's see. So we had one question come in. I think this one's both to Angela and Sarah. Who creates the newsletter for JIRA? Is it the people at JIRA, or Sarah, are you the one creating it?
Actually, can I throw that one to Daryl, because he's actually the most involved in the process?
Yeah, I'll keep it short. So it is a very collaborative process. Simply we start with outline, you know, a Word document. We make a full outline of ideas. We'll go out to our teams. We'll collect some information. This is all text. We may have some ideas of image. We take all of that stuff and we pass it to Sarah. You know, there is a lot of, and then Sarah does what she does, and she does it well. There is a lot of filtering that information down. You know, the past newsletters have had, for example, imagine like 2-3 pages of text. As lawyers, we're very familiar with many pages of text. Obviously, the final version of the newsletter has far less text. And, you know, those sorts of decisions and that curation, again, that's all Sarah. You know, the overall process is very collaborative. We do start with some brainstorming, some ideas, some content, but the finishing touches, the magic, happens on Sarah's end.
Thank you, Dara. If I can add to that, I think this is, but it goes to show that it's a very different way to convey legal information. It's not just, you know, putting some, going from words to a visual instrument. It's pretty much what I was explaining: information architecture, plain language, visual design principle. If there is a shorter way of saying exactly the same thing, then this is something I will suggest. But yeah, this is very collaborative, and I think it kind of opens up a new way of communicating in general, beyond just the newsletter.
Yeah, I just to echo something that you said there, Sarah, and I think maybe it's helpful for people to understand. It's not just adding a picture. It's not. It's a lot more than that. And again, in the end, there's a lot of removing text, right? And that it's not just adding a picture. So I see other questions coming in. So.
Can I just also add to that by saying we only showed the English version. We actually produce it bilingual. So we have a Japanese version of exactly the same newsletter, which adds a level of complexity to the process and the iterations.
Yeah, and one more thing to add on that point, because I see there's a question from someone in the audience, is you know, because of the space that the Japanese text will take up, some of the design elements do have to be changed into final versions. But we still are very sensitive to the sort of the core principles of avoiding text heavy, or, you know, in this case, sort of, you know, kanji, katakana, hiragana heavy materials. But you know, as Angela said, we do have the exact parallel version. It'll look a little bit different. It's not a straight translation.
Thank you, Daryl, Angela, and Sarah. That was really helpful. Sarah, I have another question for you. You mentioned a clickable contract during the presentation, and I think a lot of non-legal people really struggle with contracts in particular. So how does that work? Are you sending it to the other party as a clickable contract? Is it just internally used? Could you give us some more information and insight into how a clickable contract works?
Absolutely. So this is something I send my clients. So it is definitely something that I share externally. So what tends to happen is you would usually use a clickable contract for contract that tends not to be negotiated. Obviously, if you are going through a heavily redlining exercise, this won't work. But if you have anything that is barely negotiated, that is always the same, very standard, and all you have to do is update a few fields, I create the fields and I populate them on every client, so the amount, the fees, and things like that. Everything else is just clickable, so they can just click through, consume the information, sign at the end. So it would work exactly like any other contracts that you would send via DocuSign, for example, except that the end result is much more engaging, easier to navigate, and it can be signed by both parties and has any other legal document.
Just one follow-up question on that. So
sure.
If you have a you say this is the relatively simple contracts that don't change much, so likely they wouldn't end up in court. But if it ended up needing to show up in court, do you print it out? How does that work then when you need to submit it to it? For example, in Japan, you still have to submit everything on paper right now. So how does that work?
So this is still an A4 document, so you can print it off. And the idea is that it is really designed to serve a more digital first type of use case, I would say. But even if, for argument's sake, it was to be presented to court, this is something that could be just easily read and understood. And this is just an A4 document, except that it's not the vertical with lots of text, it's horizontal, and it uses a lot more illustrations. But it is a contract.
Thank you. Let's see. Okay, we have another question. If a client asks you a legal question in an email, how would you approach and gather more information to understand what the client needs? Would you recommend setting up a web meeting and ask open-ended questions?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would pick up the phone and let's say, I don't know, a client comes to me and say, I need some legal advice about X, Y, and Z. I would set up a call and try to dig in. Okay, why? Like, what made you reach out to me today? Okay, legal advice around X, Y, and Z, but why? What? Can you tell me more about the context? How did the issue arise in the first place? So you start digging in. If you do this by email, it's just a necessary back and forth, and this is also the opportunity, especially in private practice, to build relationship about really digging in. So I would definitely say pick up the phone and ask those questions on the phone.
Thank you. That's helpful.
You're welcome.
Another question that came in. So this is aimed at both Sarah and Angela. And the question is, well, the practice of law, especially the drafting of documents, can be quite conservative. So can you talk about resistance to changing that process that you have experienced? How have you guys overcome that resistance, things like that?
That's funny, because I was just about to ask Sarah how she sort of manages the change in management for her clients. I can speak briefly to our experience, and it's about testing to a small pilot group. You roll it out gradually, but you do, and you have to educate. I don't know if Daryl has anything to add, but change management is absolutely critical to uptake and sort of retaining and making sure that there is continuous uptake and adoption of such tools. But I do think that documents like legal documents, breaking it down, removing things like limitation of liability, just causes convulsions in the legal departments. I think the business people will love it, but you've got to get that across the legal test. So yeah, I would say change management is absolutely key. We don't have the solution, but we certainly are making incremental improvements with each initiative we roll out. We have some learnings. Sarah?
I'll jump in real quick and just add, the sort of the little focus group approach works really well. Stuff like this, it's going to look different, and a lot of people, maybe in a conservative Japanese company, they might initially just kind of sort of shirk. What is that? That's fine. I think that reaction can serve as an opening for a quick conversation. It seems like you're not comfortable with this document. Why? Isn't this easier than a 12-page text-heavy contract? A click-through contract. I would argue, why not? It focuses the reader and the viewer on one thing at a time. and you're just specifically focused on entering in the information as opposed to being overwhelmed by a document. I mean, it is, you know, but keep the conversations like small group. And as Angela said, you know, that is sort of a easy approach for kind of change management and stuff. But I'll go ahead and pass to Sarah.
These are, I see this all the time. My clients obviously tend to be on the in-house side, GCs, head of legal operations, and who are forward thinkers. They are the ones pushing boundaries, and you need this leadership buy-in in order to move forward. But with that being said, this isn't to say that the rest of the team will necessarily follow. You have different types of profiles. You have the early adopters, they get it, they get excited, and they really go with the new initiatives. And then you have those that are kind of in between. They are a bit not necessarily resistant, but I would say that kind of like wait and see if it's successful, see if it works, see if it's not just a gimmick. And then you have those that are a lot harder to convince. So the only way forward is go through. You know, you have to push. And the way you do that is exactly how Angela and Daryl said, by incremental improvements, starting small, because big things start small. You can't initiate an organizational-wide change in a month. It's not realistic. People are busy, etc. So definitely start small. Start with a handful. The team members who are the natural early adopters. If you are in-house, a few other business units, procurement, sales, whoever you are working with. If you are in private practice, you could start with one client that you serve, one a practice group, as opposed to the entire firm, etc. So I think it's important to kind of build those small wins, show results, communicate, and from there drive adoptions by influence. So this is my take on this.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for your presentation. I think we're going to close the questions now because we're hitting 8 o'clock. But we really appreciate your time and all of the enlightening information, I've used that word quite a few times already, that you provided. And I really hope that people were able to take away quite a bit from this presentation so that they can provide legal services in a new and innovative way going forward. And Daryl, I think there's one more slide for us at the end. Just a plug for Women in Law Japan. We have a an
Sarah, can you? Oh,
Oh,
sorry,
yes.
Sarah,
Sure.
can you advance that? Perfect.
Yes. Sorry, it wasn't me.
Quick plug for Women in Law Japan. We have an upcoming event Thursday, June 29th. It's our networking event. So save the date, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, everyone.